things about teaching is that it allows you to interact with other people and also to pass on skills or knowledge that you may have, and hopefully assist other people in their career paths with whatever it is that they're doing.
And I was never a person to say this is how it's done. You know, it was always an interaction of spinning ideas around and say, well, if you do this, that might happen or that might, and why don't you do another painting and try it, all three of them.
Talent, you know, that sort of thing is important, it's useful, it's handy to have, but without the effort, it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, I think the art department, as it was at that time, was incredibly significant and incredibly vibrant and relevant to what was happening in the community. So I think that we achieved a lot through the time we were teaching visual art at James Cook University.
For the whole time I was teaching, over 30 years, I thought, you have to give this to Townsville. Townsville really needs, as a regional city, to build the focus on the arts that a capital city has.
When I was looking at my earliest work of all, the first exhibition I had at the Martin Gallery, I realized how strongly influenced I was by my European art background and how that has gradually made way for being influenced by the Townsville environment. And that's what it's at. So if I think of my own childhood and my grandkids, but thinking, I mean, I only speak for myself because I was there, it's how much you learn by producing art. And it's not just about art, it's about all sorts of things. You know, when you produce art in the widest sense, it's making things and, you know, setting things up and doing enactments and play things, and you realize that all that creative activity. And I sometimes go back to things that I do now and I think, well, nobody taught me that. I taught myself when I was 4 years old, because I remember that. And I see my grandkids do things and I think, yeah, I know what they're learning there, you know. And I see it when I saw it in my students when I had the kids' art classes, and I saw it in my more adult students too. But I think particularly with children, that you learn so much by doing and by what you do and what you say and how you do it and how you collect your thoughts and just about everything.
I had a couple of key teachers at art college. There was a guy called David Poulsen. He was a painting teacher, and Ian Smith, and he was a painting teacher. Both of those were quite influential, but I think most of what I learned was from dead people. And by that I mean that by artists that I thought were great artists. And then I started to look at their work, I started to buy their work, and I started to build up a collection of artist work who I really liked. Well, in the early days, I was doing a lot of work that related to the stories of people living in the suburbs. And so I produced many etchings and many books of etchings on suburban related etchings and humorous stories and stuff like that. So there are many images that I made in the early days that related to crazy stories that people told me.
Well, my first watercolour I did for my mum when I was about 9. And so I guess she encouraged, or my parents encouraged us to do some artwork. And in primary correspondence school you had to do a lot of writing, and so naturally you were using your hands a lot to write, and then there'd be drawing lessons in there. So I think quite early. And my grandmother, my mum's mother, painted, and my dad's mother took photographs, and she developed her own photographs. So those things sort of impact on you, and so I grew up with those things around me. And then at boarding school I had a series of art teachers that were actually good artists, and then one of them went on to be the first woman of the National Gallery, the head of the National Gallery. We had lots of freedom as kids. We learned school with primary correspondence, and I think from those early days I've still got a sense of the colour out west, and I use that in my artwork a lot. So it was pretty idyllic.
I remember when I was quite young, when other artists used to talk about their work, and they'd say about how, vibrant the colours are up here, and, that sort of thing, and how it's such an inspirational place to live in. And because I grew up here, I didn't really see that. I didn't see it as anything special. And so it wasn't until I travelled overseas and I sort of got stuck somewhere in, there was too much snow for the planes to fly, and we were in a motel room looking out the window at just grey. There was just no colour.
I came out of a school in London, Camberwell School of Art and Crafts, that put a very high emphasis on drawing, on a student's drawing ability. Without it, you couldn't remain at the college. So I've carried that tradition forward, hopefully, in my own way, and used it all through my teaching career. Well, I came down to Townsville from Innisfail, where I was teaching at the high school, at the invitation of the Higher Education Authority, and particularly that part of it that deals with TAFE colleges, and asked to co-start a course in visual art in Townsville, at the Townsville College of TAFE as it was then, which would be headed up by a senior lecturer from Seven Hill College of Art. That was back in 1975. Jim Cox, who was the lecturer that came up from Seven Hills, and myself worked together to design a course, or a first year of a course. That was at TAFE in town, when it still belonged to TAFE. And we moved up to Pimlico in the early 80s. The university had biological sciences there. They moved out, we moved in. But we were so short of space that we actually had to take some space in the high school as well, which they were very unhappy about at the time, being pushed for space themselves, until we were able to move out, of course. They were duly compensated, I'm sure. And then in 1991, we were taken over lock, stock and barrel by the university.
In those early years, there was a person in the Art Society who had a studio in West End, and when she left, because her husband was transferred, she said, well, why don't you have my studio? And she had some art classes for kids. And so I took over those art classes, which was really lovely. And I recently have been in touch again with her husband, who moved back to Townsville for the winter anyway. And we were talking about old times. And so those kids' classes grew. So I had a group of kids every day after school, which was wonderful. Some of those students that came to me when they were 6 years old ended up as my students at art school. One of them being Marion Gamus, who is now a very well-known Townsville artist. She does fibre arts, and she was in the Sydney Biennale. So how about that? What a great idea to to contextualize the art school, you know, in its function in the community and the students produced and that whole thing.
It's easy to be lost teaching within an institution. So unless you get out and do something in the field that you're in, which is promoted by, certainly by most universities, nobody knows about you. So from that point of view, the practice is very important. It was both important that the students that I had could see what I was doing, the fact that I still practiced and just didn't talk about it, and also that my own skills hopefully would be ahead of theirs in most cases. So Lucy Smith was a student who had a passionate interest in botanical illustration, which is a bit left of field for me. But because I was teaching rendering techniques and illustration at university, I ended up teaching her.
I had Bob Preston, Monica Silver and James Brown, and they were the three influences on me. And they're all amazing artists, all very different and all taught you different things. And Bob really taught me to draw. He was amazing. And Monica with the painting as well as James. And so, you know, I would say they would be outstanding lecturers and teachers. And the influence that they've given me is, I remember one of them saying to me, I won't say who, you work hard, then you receive the rewards. And I always work to get rid of all the normal stuff so that I can come and get the rewards. So my painting is really rewarding for me.
Talent, you know, that sort of thing is important. It's useful, it's handy to have, but without the effort, it's not going to go anywhere. I think you have to be prepared to put in a lot of time and I read a good saying recently, to not hold on to mistakes for too long. If they're not working, chuck them out and start again. Just because you put a lot of time into something doesn't mean you can fix it. You know, it's sometimes just not going to work.
I had Bob Preston for third-year drawing, and that was extremely good. Again, technical. James Brown for certain things. Didn't have a lot of James, but I had him for different subjects, and I loved his technical mind. He really is one of the best painting technicians I've ever come across, and he's on how to apply paint. Yes, so we had those. Monica Silver developed my interest in art history, and that was actually pretty even before I came to JCU, I'd met Monica and she'd run workshops applying arts out west. And T again was extremely supportive.
I think certainly it would have been latterly the people that taught me, and I've worked alongside some of them and taught with all of them, in parallel with them anyway. Some closely, for example, Ron McBurney and Dr. Monica Silver, for example, we taught together on the same courses, and also design courses together, and have done for years. And also, in the case of, particularly with Ron McBurney, we go out working as well still, since Ron left university. And I see quite a bit of Annika as well. We visit each other's studios and see what each other are doing.
You're imparting what you know to your students, but from other colleagues who work there. So there are a number of colleagues who are part of the exhibition that I'm in, that we're talking about. Annika Silva, Robert Preston and James Brown, and they were three colleagues who were of great influence in various ways on my work. So they are very important in the mix. Probably, just as far as saying, oh, you should look at this artist, or you should do this, or try this, just varying things in the discussion we have as well. Cherie was one of the students that I had, and she also helped us when we ran the Lyrebird Press. So as well as being a printmaking student, she came in with a couple of other students and helped us edition prints and make books with some of the artists that we had from Sydney, Melbourne and places like that. Yeah, so she gained experience both in being a student, but also helping us with the press.
Ron was an excellent teacher. He was very different, very hands-on, he was very good at looking at people's work and saying, this reminds me of this. Look up this artist when you go to the library and have a look at their work. So he was really great at exposing us to other people. It wasn't just and directing us. It wasn't just he wasn't just asking us questions about who we're interested in and going there. I mean, that happened too, but he often gave it was part of his coursework was to give demonstrations, and he was very good at that.
He is absolutely an amazing teacher, and I felt that I learnt so much about techniques, and James was one of my supervisors for my doctorate, and he encouraged me with all my metaphysical things, all the work that underpins the paintings, and encouraged me to go the direction that I was heading in. So he's been a wonderful teacher for a long time.
Daphne Cazalet is probably, she's the one that I chose for this project. Daphne was an actress basically, who talented in many other disciplines too, and she decided to do a degree in visual arts and do an honours program as well, and produced a lovely set of drawing paintings related to expression of emotions, and she had some of her acting colleagues act out the emotion, and then she used them as models in that pose and did these paintings, and one of the paintings is in the exhibition.
started with the BBA and all the way through to a PhD, but it was just the way that they worked, their instructions, and their support, basically. That was the main thing that worked very well with me, and of course their knowledge, their technical knowledge, and being able to reference. Anne and Ron particularly were very, very good at knowing what was happening in the current art world, and not just printmaking, and historically, particularly with Anne, because I've had Anne for drawing as well as printmaking.
I learnt so much there, and I just loved it. So it was an enormous influence. Probably still continuing too, and I'm still friendly with most of my lecturers too. The hooker that I've got over there, I did with Jane. That was in my masters, because she's very good at casting. I cast, but I wouldn't say I was anywhere as neat as Jane. She's really good caster. The key lady over there, I did in my 3rd year with Jane, and she was really good. She'd teach us a very basic skill about casting and then let us run with it. And then I sort of brought in the ideas of the recycled materials and went from there, and the welding in the cast and that sort of thing. So I like to combine things. So, and then, yeah, I did my honours with Jane as well.
I don't think I use my art to try and, change people's minds about things or present, common topical sort of things in a different way. I think I'm more about just enjoying form and shape and playing around with ideas, but not necessarily for someone else's benefit, but just for my own. But at this stage of my life, I'm just starting. I feel like I'm just starting again. I think at long last I'm not so concerned about what other people think. I'm just more interested in just exploring and doing things that interest me, and if it's stuff people like, that's great, and if it's not, well,
in art in general, that there's one of construction, there's one of expression, and there's of realism. And so in many ways I could relate to students' leanings and bounce ideas rather than saying do this or that. And that in itself, I suppose that humility that comes from being in that position is very good for a painter, and the stimulus from always questioning yourself and them and what's going on in the art world too.
Having been on the tail end of a PhD when I left, my last year and part of the year following when I left university was taken up completely with writing my thesis and polishing it up, which I found extraordinarily difficult. During that time I didn't put brush to canvas or pencil to paper at all. When I came to recommence my practice, having finished the PhD successfully, I had no idea what to do anymore. I'd had almost 2 years without doing anything, and something which I had taken for granted, which was a steady flow of work, had been interrupted fairly seriously, and I found it very difficult to get back into it. Well, one of the things about teaching is that it allows you to interact with other people, and also to pass on skills or knowledge that you may have, and hopefully assist other people in their career paths with whatever it is that they're doing. In visual art, that's extremely difficult because a lot of it's very hands-on.
I think I always, when I need it is my own outlook too. But I remember John Coburn, who came here quite a few times, and we had interesting dialogues with him, and he would look over his glasses and smile his smile, said, because somebody asked him what kept him going, and he said, "I always think I can do a better one," and I think that's probably stands for me too.
I think the difficulty with art is that you can become too obsessive and too focused, and you know, you've got to get back to the real world and, you know, pay the bills and do this and that. So I think that I have to be aware that I can't be too obsessive with it, and I've got to be focused, but then get on with other things. You know, just be a normal person most of the time. Yeah. So I try not to take it too seriously. I think the art department, as it was at that time, was incredibly significant and incredibly vibrant and relevant to what was happening in the community. So I think that we achieved a lot through the time we were teaching visual art at James Cook University. And so it's, you know, it's nice for people to know, see the work and see some of the student work that was produced as a result of our teaching.
History is really important to me, and because, I mean, it wasn't until I turned probably about 45 that I realised how important it was to be in touch with one's history. And it's becoming more and more important as I get older. So I'm always encouraging young people to look at their own history as well as the history of where they come from. That kind of thing can often inspire other things, you know,
Yeah,
creative
definitely.
work.
The drawing, because it's from me, the drawing is still basically the essence of the work. How I've looked at a place and then done a drawing and then taken that drawing into an artwork.
Look, I think art is absolutely vital to a community, and I think artists and art in general allows a community to have a look at itself, and that comes from dialogue with the artist as a person, but also as the art they produce, whether it's plays or dance pieces or music or visual arts. It's a vital aspect of a community being alive and being aware and making things worthwhile.